Good morning, everyone. My name is Philip MacAlister. I am the head of mobile development at Gowalla. Actually, I'm standing in for our CEO who took a quick trip to California. But thank you very much for having me. Today, I wanted to talk to you about how we do mobile development at Gowalla. For you that don't know what Gowalla is, it's a location-based application that allows you to explore the world. So probably the best place to start with the presentation is to kind of explain what Gowalla is as a company, which kind of drives everything that we do. Our mission is to encourage people to discover the world's most loved places and share them to the world around them. The people that we hire at Gowalla share the same vision. I think that is probably the biggest factor that comes into our hiring. When I came to Gowalla, actually, I had been traveling around Asia, and I ran into a guy, Joseph Williams, in Beijing. We were in a hostel, and he was telling me a story about how he had been going across the Trans-Siberian railway in Russia, and how he was using this application called Gowalla to record his places. And at the time, I didn't even have a smartphone with me anymore, but I thought that was pretty interesting. A few months later, I was having a beer in Austin, Texas, and I ran into the CTO of Gowalla, and we were just chit-chatting. I happened to mention that I had been doing startups for several years, and he actually asked if I wanted to come work for the company on the spot. So it was kind of an interesting dynamic at the company. So the thing about Gowalla is that we have kind of an interesting culture. We are a tight-knit company of about 30 people. We live at, most of the company is in Austin, Texas. Everyone loves the city who works there. We have a lot of cultural things like shared coffee runs. We do daily lunch together. We play basketball together. The CTO and the CEO are all in a big loft area. It sounds like perhaps standard startup things that everyone does, but actually really does shape the way that we run the company. The employees, they take personal pride in their work. Our head iOS designer is the #2 dude on Dribble, and I know that he wants to reclaim his, or excuse me, keep his position as the #2. Well, maybe he wants to be number one man. And even within the community, our employees take part in the local tech community as instructors and as teachers and things like that. And it really is kind of the thing that determines the type of people that we hire. So today what I wanted to do was kind of take you through a case study of Gowalla for Android. We've had 3 major versions over the last 2.5 years, and every version came with unique pitfalls and insights, and I think that perhaps this kind of practical example might help all of us understand some insights into mobile development. So the first Gowalla, Gowalla II for Android, actually there wasn't a Gowalla 1 for Android because that was iOS only. What we did was we hired a kind of a rock star development agency in San Francisco, because at the time there wasn't as many Android developers around. And we also had a huge amount of work to do in a very little amount of time. I think it was about 4 months to put together an entire app for South by South by Southwest in Austin in 2009. So what we did was we sent a designer out to San Francisco and worked with them for about 3 or 4 weeks, kind of giving a top-down approach, telling them what the requirements were and how we wanted it done. And truth be told, it was they did an amazing job. But the downsides of it was unbelievably expensive, and it turned out to be an app that, quite frankly, didn't quite feel like what Gowalla was. I'll show you an example of it. They got all the features in there. It's, looked pretty good. It had kind of our color branding and things like that. But for Gowalla, which is a consumer-based company, makes consumer-based products, it didn't really have that special flair. I think that the reason why people use our products is because it has something magical about it. And Gowalla II kind of, for Android, even though it was good, it felt a little flat. Just briefly, in case anyone's never used Gowalla, the features are, in Gowalla II, it was about checking in at your favorite spots, taking trips, exchanging digital items, collectibles, and making a digital passport of your life. And that's essentially what Gowalla, the product, is. So the next version of Gowalla, what had happened was, so we had hired this expensive agency. So before they had the chance to bankrupt the company, we found an outside firm local in Austin to kind of transition the project to something more reasonable and iterate on that. The problem was that no one really owned the project, and I think that that's probably the most important thing in the next iteration of an application, was that we found someone who really wanted to take pride in the project and run the project. And so what we did was, once we had found that person, we took the developer and the designer and locked them in a room. We called it Office 1B. That guy in the blue shirt there is the designer. And we only let them out to play basketball for 4 months. And basically, after that, we came out with a product. And so over the next couple slides, I'll discuss how that went. So this is kind of the traditional and modern approaches to designers and programmers. Traditional approach, which was kind of the Gowalla II approach, is the man gives the product to a designer, and the designer gives his comps and his assets to a developer, and a few months later, you're kind of given this, thing. The modern approach, of course, is that the product people, the CEO, in this case, the designers and the developers all have a tight-knit relationship. It's kind of interesting, but there's some really basic examples of how this works. Some is just like on Android, there's kind of a understanding of how screen resolutions work, and I think in the first version of Gowalla, there wasn't really that sort of understanding, and it's important to have this common design language established with the developers and the designers. An advanced example is something just on how row recycling works on Android, for example. Android has some really interesting strategies on how it works, and if the designer doesn't understand that, you end up getting images that swap out randomly all the time, and kind of a really strange user experience. Interesting enough, if there's this tight-knit relationship between the developer and the designer, you kind of get this synergy and this approach where kind of an amazing product ends up coming out. Even the smallest design decisions, such as having certain elements fade in versus pop in, can not only like bring kind of a pop to the app, but also can determine its performance. There's also another parallel to this in that I watch a lot of Mad Men, which I apparently isn't the biggest show in the UK. I don't know, but in the US, it's like one of my favorite shows. And in the show, they talk about how they used to separate copywriters and designers. Copywriters and illustrators in this case. And I think that that's a similar parallel here is for a company that's building mobile apps, it's, I think, really important to combine the two and to make sure that they have a strong working relationship. So one of the big questions is, can it be done? With consumer apps, as I was saying before, I think that the thing is you want to make an app that really stands apart. If it's just a standard app using the standard SDK, the set of tools that one might use, you might as well build a web app, to be quite honest. At least in the consumer-based world, the reason why people use apps is it brings about a special feeling to them. And at Gowalla, we've hired designers and illustrators to help us bring about that magical feeling. Unfortunately, designers love to do things that are very, very difficult. One of the examples that we face in the Android app is our designer came up with a really unique way to associate information in a list. He thought of this way that you can combine graphical objects and textual objects and have them move at different paces, but have them be associated. And our engineer at the time was thinking, man, this is impossible. And after some prodding by the designer, he spent a weekend thinking about it and was able to do it in a couple of days. And I think that those sort of decisions about is this special, will this make the app unique, really are the things that produce incredible applications. So I just wanted to spend a minute talking about project management. I'm not quite sure what the background of everyone here is, whether it's large enterprise systems or smaller startups, but for the Gowalla 3 for Android, I wanted to share how we did project management, just as perhaps a kind of a unique thought for you. So there was kind of a four-step process in which we just established a basic information architecture. We enumerated every screen that we needed. We gave time estimates for every screen, prioritized those screens to create a minimal viable product, and then we implemented features to track the progress given the estimates. And we reported to the man on a regular schedule. So with this, we didn't use any complex software. We didn't use any, what is that Microsoft project? And we came up with a successful product. But I think the key to that was that we had people who took ownership in the project. When there wasn't a project manager. There was only the engineers who took responsibility to deliver on a spreadsheet that they created themselves. I only bring this up as it was a very cost-effective and efficient mechanism. However, I don't necessarily recommend it for everyone else. But in the place of a tight-knit team of a designer and a programmer, it works incredibly effectively. On the technical side of things, just for your interests, we use a product called GitHub Issues to track our bugs and features. And I just wanted to note that it really is an incredible piece of Web 2.0 software. However, it's not great for prioritization. So after the end of Gowalla III, I think that project took us 5 months. We launched that at South by this last year. We were able to win the Android award at South by, but we also saw an immediate 33% increase in the total number of active installs. And we were also featured in the Android marketplace. This is Gowalla III. It had a completely redone UI, and it felt like Gowalla was meant to feel like. It had a special feel to it. There were animations. The information architecture felt natural. There was over 25 custom components, and it had a code base that could be maintained internally. So after that, I was the project manager for that, the product manager for that. We had probably about 3 weeks off, and the CEO flies in, and he calls everyone in for a meeting, and he announces that, guess what, everyone, we're doing a complete rewrite of all of our mobile products. And needless to say, I was not very happy. Just for a little background, Foursquare has always kind of been our major competitor in the location-based services space, and we were trying to get away from being categorized as a competitor of Foursquare. We never really saw ourselves as merely a check-in application. We saw ourselves as an application to help people explore the world, and so we wanted an inspiration to build a new app. And Bruce Lee ended up being our inspiration. We wanted an app that was slimmer and faster and more suited for getting people to explore the world. So internally, that became also our inspiration. We put pictures of Bruce Lee everywhere, and it really changed kind of the way that we saw ourselves building a product in the company. We were also given the deadline of 4 months to complete a brand new product. Some of the things also had to go by the wayside, and there were great risks to that. I mentioned earlier that at Gowalla we had these things called items, digital collectibles. We decided to do away with that, and that was a really controversial decision, and one that I'll talk a little bit more about. But it was kind of some of these hard decisions that helped us develop what we considered a better product. So this was the first. This was the first product that had both iPhone and Android released at the same time, and what we tried to concentrate on here was having a little bit of friendly competition. We used a product called Campfire, and we had a kind of a separate room for iterating on design. And what happened was kind of an interesting thing, that the iPhone and the Android products came out looking a little bit differently, but I think ultimately they were built in such a way that were unique and appropriate for their platform. The downsides to that that methodology was that it became harder to manage, and there was a temptation when Team iPhone came up with a new feature that was really freaking cool. Team Android wanted to go back and implement it, but unfortunately the schedule just didn't dictate that at all. And as a result, for Android, this became the new Gowalla 4. It was a new emphasis, 100% brand new app to the outside user. We did share about 30% of the original code base. In particular, the networking, caching, and utility functions were still there. It was a ton of work. It was high risk. But we considered it a product that was here to stay in line with the mission of the company. The features were guides, a new way to look at spots and lists in a city or place with local friend and expert points of view, and stories. It was getting away from the transactional check-in mechanism toward a boldly social and boldly content-oriented and boldly not gamey application. Unfortunately, when we removed the gamey part of the app, a lot of people were really upset. But those people really only made up about 1% of our user base. So it was kind of these tough decisions that every company has to make, and we made them. And I think in the long term, we're starting to see their success. People are using our product in a way that is scalable instead of just a very small user base that wants to use our product like a game. In the startup world, there's you're given deadlines that no matter the amount of human effort, the resources, you can never produce a perfect finished product. And I think that in some ways, Gowalla 4 was kind of an example of that. There are bugs, there are mistakes, but we also have customer support that continually answers our customers' questions and continually addresses it. And there's a sort of love that's shown for the product and for the users that the users respond to and the community as a whole responds to. In conclusion, that's a product that launches with a few problems, but a lot of love is better than a product that never launches at all. So the conclusions, for Gowalla, our company's employees and the chemistry that they work together, perhaps it's obvious, but it really is the core of the company. For consumer mobile applications, having designers build and push the limits to truly make a magical experience for a user is the key to success, and a culture that fosters relationships and allows employees to take ownership of their project is truly the recipe for success. Thank you.
We won't have time for questions, but people can find you at the break, yeah?
Yes, of course.
You recognize him, he's the guy with the blue t-shirt. Do you live in Austin?
I do, yes.
That's the Austin coolness for you.
Well, I wore a jacket. That's my London coolness for you.
Cool, thanks a lot.
Thank you.